222 Exhibition Street is a large commercial building located at the eastern end of the Melbourne CBD, adjacent to the Chinatown precinct in between Little Bourke and Lonsdale Streets. Built in the 1980s, the building has 29 levels including parking, retail and office spaces. Currently, it has office space leased to a variety of organisations including Victorian government agencies and private companies. The building underwent a major plant and equipment upgrade in 2010. The owner, LaSalle Investment Management, has committed to owning a 4.5-star energy rating as assessed by the National Australian Built Environment Rating System, or NABERS. NABERS is a national initiative run by the New South Wales Office of Environment and Heritage on behalf of all federal, state and territory governments in Australia. As the building owners are committed to sustainability, it is a good opportunity to do an environmental audit of the building to assist the owners in reaching their sustainability goals. An environmental management system, or EMS, is a voluntary action private businesses can take to reduce their environmental impact and ensure compliance with the relevant jurisdiction's environmental laws. An environmental audit is the first step in creating an EMS. In the 1970s, command and control methods such as imposing limits on emissions were used by governments to enforce environmental regulations. These methods were harshly criticised as being heavy-handed, inflexible and cost-ineffective. Economic incentives such as pollution taxes or emissions trading were touted as cost-effective alternatives to the command and control methods of regulation in the 1980s. However, as was seen in Australia when the Gillard government introduced carbon pricing legislation in 2011, these economic incentives can be politically fraught to implement. This has led to the adoption of voluntary action approach for businesses to regulate their environmental impacts. This approach is seen to be more flexible, effective, and less costly than traditional approaches. The creation and implementation of an EMS involves 5 stages. The first stage is for the senior management to adopt an environmental policy statement that commits the organisation to comply with all applicable regulations and other obligations, and to continuously reduce and prevent pollution. The next stage is planning an audit of all the organisation's significant environmental impacts of its activities. There is also identification of all legal, contractual and voluntary environmental obligations the company has and establishing procedures for meeting these. On the basis of these reviews, the organisation develops objectives and targets to be achieved with the EMS. The third stage is implementing the audit by training employees and developing operational and communication procedures designed to minimise impacts identified in the audit. Stage 4 involves monitoring day-to-day practices of the company to make sure they comply with the new procedures. Detailed procedures need to be developed for the frequency and methodology of regular audits. The last stage is for senior management to develop a routine of re-evaluating the EMS in order to ensure continuous improvement of its effectiveness. As EMS is a voluntary process, there have been various accreditation systems such as ISO 14001, developed in order to enable more consistent evaluation of environmental effects. Having an EMS accredited through an external organisation can add legitimacy to it. However, some critics argue that accreditation from third-party organisations is merely a marketing device designed to improve corporate image without actually impacting environmental performance. As previously mentioned, the EMS process is designed to help businesses identify their environmental impacts and mitigate them. There are many reasons, besides concern for the environment, why a company might implement an EMS. Having an EMS makes business sense. By ensuring the business is compliant with the local environmental laws and regulations, costs are saved through not having to pay fines or having to upgrade a lot of equipment at once as a result of a negative government audit. Costs are also saved through utility efficiencies identified in the EMS. An EMS relies on everyone in the company working together to achieve its outcomes, so implementing one can lead to increased employee engagement and empowerment. Having an EMS can also improve the company's reputation in the community and increase the amount of business the company does. Studies have also shown that having an EMS drives innovation in a business across various areas, from product design, use of technology, and approaches. Although the building has a cafe on the ground floor, this study will not be examining the environmental impacts of it due to space constraints. Instead, this study will focus on the impacts of the office levels of the building, as these levels take up the most space in the building and thus have the biggest impact. Nicholson explains, an EMS revolves around environmental aspects. Using loss control principles of cause and effect, aspects can be regarded as the cause of environmental impacts. He argues that organisations must address the aspects of waste, energy and water. This is why these aspects have been chosen for this audit. The fourth aspect that will be examined is exterior building materials, as these are a specific aspect to this case study and cause significant environmental impacts. Waste is the first aspect to be examined in this study. Observed impacts for this aspect include: recycling is not separated out into different streams. Glass, paper, hard and soft plastic all go in the one bin. Employee behaviour means food waste is often thrown in the landfill bin, and there is no separate e-waste recycling. All e-waste goes into the landfill bin. Energy is the second aspect to be examined in this study. Observed impacts for this aspect include: lights are not on a motion sensor, so are on all the time. Printers are left on 24/7. And employee behaviour means some computers are left on over weekends and other leave periods. Water is the third aspect to be examined. Observed impacts for the water aspect include: water inefficient toilets. They are dual flush but have a very long flush cycle. Environmental cycle on the dishwasher is not consistently used, as there are no signs communicating the benefits of this cycle to employees. And taps in the bathroom are on a longer timer, causing water to be wasted after people have finished washing their hands. Exterior building materials is the last aspect to be examined. The building is made from materials such as glass and steel that have the following impacts. Because the building is mostly glass, it impacts on the internal thermal environment, which increases the use of heating and cooling. And as the building exterior is a combination of glass and steel, it contributes to the urban heat island effect experienced in the Melbourne CBD. The risk assessment table demonstrates that all chosen impacts have quite high total scores. E-waste was specifically targeted in the risk assessment table, as the Victorian Government has legislated a ban on e-waste going to landfill that will begin in 2019. Due to the urgency of this legislative change, I thought it prudent to examine this impact rather than the waste aspect more generally. Exterior building materials earned the highest score, as it was judged to have a high severity of impact, as well as being the most expensive aspect to remediate. A completed risk assessment gives the organisation clarity on what impacts to address in their EMS. The following tables show an outline of an EMS that LaSalle Investment Management could adopt for 222 Exhibition Street. As mentioned previously, there will be a ban on e-waste going to landfill coming into force in July 2019. The table reflects this incoming ban in the target and timelines. It is imperative that the building owners find a facility to take the building's e-waste by the July 2019 deadline. Responsibility for executing this objective falls to the building owners, facilities management, and the building's tenants and their staff. The reducing energy use and efficiencies aspect has two targets. One, to reduce the amount of time computer equipment is left on unnecessarily, and the other to halve the amount of time the lights are left on after hours. The success of these actions relies on effective implementation of behaviour change information and incentives by facilities management, as well as tenants and their staff implementing the new procedures. To reduce water inefficiencies in the building, there is a lot of infrastructure that needs to be replaced, upgraded, or installed. There is also a behaviour change component that needs to be enacted to ensure staff in the building are using water efficiently. Installing rainwater capture and storage infrastructure will not only reduce the amount of potable water being used to flush toilets, but will also save tenants money on their water bills. The main target for reducing the impact of the exterior building materials is to reduce the contribution the building makes to Melbourne's urban heat island effect. To do this, the actions outline a comprehensive program of greening the existing building facade. The action to replace the glass windows in the building with double glazed ones will be quite a large program of work, so it is recommended it is done slowly to minimise disruption to tenants and to spread the cost across multiple years. In order for an organisation to succeed with an EMS, top levels of management need to be on board. If there is no commitment by management to the EMS, there will be no EMS. A policy statement signals the commitment of management to comply with the EMS and other regulations of the relevant jurisdiction. It can also be made publicly available to signal to stakeholders and the wider community that the organisation is committed to its EMS and thus sustainability. The outline for the LaSalle Investment Management EMS for 222 Exhibition Street could look like this. It could commit the organisation to working with tenants to train their employees on new EMS procedures, complying with all Victorian and federal government environment legislation and regulation, becoming a leading example in Melbourne of how to successfully implement a wide-ranging EMS for a commercial building, and continuously improve the EMS and related procedures, communication plans, and other documents.